Thank you very much indeed, Julie, and a very warm welcome, everyone, to the relaunch of the IIRSM East Anglian branch. I'm absolutely delighted that John Nelson, the Health and Safety Lead with ISG, is joining us to give an insighting presentation around enhancing the value of safety and risk management. John has a number of years' experience within our profession, and he keenly supports the aims, objectives and missions of IIRSM. In addition, he also makes regular contributions to the Sentinel magazine, which obviously you as members would receive a copy of. So with no further ado, I'd like to take the opportunity to hand you over to John Nelson and his presentation, Enhancing the Value of Safety and Risk Management. Thank you, John, and welcome.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Tony. First of all, it's great to be here. So thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation. Although I guess I do have one hand tied behind my back. No, just joking. I'll come on to that. Yeah, I guess I can't believe it's all come together so quickly, really. So it was when Tony and I had a catch up at the IIRSM President's Reception in September at the Mermaid Centre, London. Tony let me into a secret that he was pushing for the relaunch of the IIRSM East Anglia branch. So it was that kind of conversation in terms of bringing some new energy and new life into the branch with the support of Jonathan and others, and just inviting me to, I guess, give this opening presentation. The title of the presentation, Enhancing the Value of Safety and Risk Management. Well, safety and risk management is such a broad church. A little bit difficult how to define it really in terms of the title, but when I took a step back from it, it really is about, you know, looking at those marginal improvements we can make within the function, but also to support the businesses we work for, including the end customer. That's where I was just thinking about the enhancing the value. Sometimes it's how we're perceived, but I'll come on to more of that and you get a feel for it. So who am I? I'm a trustee of the IIRSM. I've been a member of the IIRSM for quite a few years, and I've really enjoyed the community. I just feel it's a community whereby everybody I speak to is extremely approachable. There's lots of energy at the moment going through the IIRSM, and I think that's in part to you members, but also the committees of all the branches. If you look at, you know, just where the branches are compared to 12 months ago, we're in a very different place, and I think it's great. In terms of my role outside of the IIRSM, so if you look at my LinkedIn profile, it still says Head of HSQE with Yonder, and not Health and Safety Lead for the data center business within ISG. The reason being, I cheaply transferred on the 1st of July to ISG, but I've been seconded back to Yonder in terms of close out some high-profile projects. And today I'm in Belgium, hence I'm in darkness, so I don't have a big bright light above my head. So I guess for convenience and to help you formulate your takeaways, Julie knows what I'm on about when I talk about takeaways, and hopefully there will be plenty. My presentation is, I guess, in 3 parts. They're all interconnected. Whatever break it down, the first part or the first phase is about the orientation and planning. The second part will focus on teams, and the third part, and arguably the most challenging when I reflect, is messaging. How to continually and consistently motivate others, how to keep something fresh and keep people inspired, or at the very least keep them tuned into what you're trying to achieve as a function and or as a business. Thanks, Julie. If we can go to the next slide, that would be appreciated. I guess first of all, we've got to start with the why. I want to give you a bit of context. And what I'm going to share with you today is essence, nothing more than we do from improvement wise, be it tweaks, etc., to organizations, or what organizations are doing today, or perhaps what they want to do in terms of change management program, be it organizational wide or just for example, the safety and risk management function. Whether you call it HSQE, SHEC, risk and assurance, QSE, etc., 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 it becomes irrelevant. It's all part of what we do naturally, I guess, as a continuous improvement program. Okay, a little context, and this is where Tony kind of like came from in terms of asking me to give this particular presentation. So there was a time when I was reporting into 5 boards with 3 operational businesses with 3 MDs. Each of the MDs were championing or positioning themselves for a vacant CEO because the CEO had stepped up into the chairperson role. But also, one of the businesses was looking to change direction or change the products or services it provided within the construction industry, arguably. This particular business wanted to move from developing and maintaining clean rooms in the pharmaceutical industry to expansion into the data center space, but also getting into that kind of energy from waste space as well in terms of as an energy producer. Certainly in terms of the design, build and operate and maintain model as well, which we see quite frequently and hear quite frequently. Now, part of the context also was about this particular business moving from project value circa 9 to 15 million, almost overnight, moving to project values of 79 million to 125 million plus. And that's working mainly in the UK, but also the Republic of Ireland or Ireland. Bit of context. Thank you. Next slide. Thanks, Julie. Thank you. So I mentioned the first part of the first phase being around orientation and planning, and I guess in my mind I typically think about strategic, tactical, operational in terms of where we're going to focus on. As you can imagine, with the risk that I've shared with you already, there's lots of risk involved, but that decision is to, yes, they can move forward into that new space in terms of data centers, but also energy from waste. You know, the reward arguably outweighed the risk, but to get to that, it meant a quite significant overhaul of its people, its internal resource, and also its supply chain. That's not necessarily letting people go from the business, but thinking about, okay, what skill set do we require in order to deliver these new projects? But also recognizing what I call the incubation period in terms of that, from a high level conversation, concept level, arguably, conceptual level with the potential customer about, we can provide you this data center, we can design and build it for you, or we can design, build and operate and maintain its energy from waste facility. And that is a risk, but you know, the risk, the opportunity was there and the reward was really great. But again, whether your business is on that kind of trajectory, or you're just looking for organic or growth, be it organic or otherwise, or you're just looking to make improvements for, let's say, the next 3 to 5 years, arguably no more than that, then I'm going to take you through some tools which hopefully will help you. So if we go to the next slide, then please, Julie, thank you. So thinking about that kind of strategic, tactical, and operational focus. This slide looks extremely busy, but when you break it down, it just gives you a roadmap, a high-level roadmap in terms of to realizing that strategy. And I'm firmly of the opinion whereby, in terms of our roles, we are there to support our colleagues internally and also deliver the service to the customers externally, regardless of what products and service you're doing. We are there to enable the business to move forward. And having the understanding of where the business is and where the business wants to get to, I think is fundamental, it's crucial, and it's key to what we have to do as a team. We have to think about the appetite and tolerance to risk And that will ebb and flow as time goes by. There'll be external pressures, there'll be internal pressures, but we have to be mindful of that. And sometimes you can't always formalize it, but certainly you have to, through your conversations with your internal stakeholders, that relationship management piece is to really understand and be a part of that decision-making process. Some more than others, depending where we are in the organization. So you start off with that kind of like, okay, what are we here for? What's our raison d'etre or mission statement, as sometimes people come up with? Okay, well, it's to make money, it's to deliver a service, etc. But actually something for the greater good in terms of our society, the communities we're working. And break that down from a kind of like what it looks like. Well, financially, we want to make bigger margins, increase our turnover. We want to move from that kind of circa 180 million to about 500 million in over a period of time. We want our brand to be recognized in the marketplace, which is all about brand enhancement. Maybe, as in this particular case, we want to increase revenue and diversify in terms of what we're doing, the offering, the product or service offering. And then you start to think about, okay, I can see it all coming together now. I can see what they're trying to get to, high level. And then you can also ask questions such as, okay, what are the actual targets? What are those financial metrics that you're looking to achieve? And now this is not about financial risk, I guess, from a safety perspective and a risk perspective, but it's understanding that. Because in some markets, the margins are much smaller, whereas other markets, these new markets, whilst there's a risk there, actually their margin could be far greater, arguably. And then depending on how you go about delivering your products or services, that can have a detrimental effect to that margin as well, be it good, better, and different. And equally, there is risk associated with that. So the questions I put on this slide is just to give you a bit of a feel for some of the questions and some of the areas you're looking at. When you think about the commercial strategy, they're then starting to think about, okay, well, what is the price point? Are we looking to increase sales from X products or services? You know, what is that kind of proposed or increased margin? And you can use this slide in any way just to help give you that structure. You know, there are key questions there, arguably. You know, when I think about this particular company, you know, they'd never worked in the Republic of Ireland before. So going into Ireland, setting up a company in Ireland, as much as you're doing anywhere in the globe nowadays, especially in Europe since Brexit. You know, that whole kind of setting up a new company and what it involves is quite key. Then think about just your supply chain. So that kind of new geographies, even in one particular country, you've got to be thinking about your supply chain. You know, are you looking for new supply chain partners to work with, delivery partners, or are you bringing people you've worked with before and continue to do so, bringing them along with you? Now, I think we've all got examples whereby, you know, you've got your good, bad, and indifferent supply chain partners, and those typically who are the good ones, we put more and more pressure on those. But unfortunately, over a period of time, that can really start to dilute their capacity and capability to deliver. And then they may start to drop in terms of their performance. And that's from a safety perspective right through to the commercial perspective as well. So that whole kind of supply chain relationship is crucial to as well. With this slide as well, you know, you'll see in the top right hand corner, I've kind of got there about kind of like the little box showing the kind of like operating principles. This is about who we are and what we're about as a business. You know, what we do, what kind of culture we think we've got in here. You know, and that kind of mindset is in terms of, are we all about making short-term decisions or making decisions for the medium to long term? And that's a difficult one. Thinking about the organization in this context as well, it was about the capabilities in terms of the internal and external. You know, this particular organization had a supply chain of about 500, maybe 450, if I remember off the top of my head. And we had to break that down as well as go to market and meet some new supply chain partners. You know, that whole kind of policy and authorities, including delegated authorities, I think sometimes we miss. Thinking about that process, and it's not being plugging a management system up, and the management system is in entirety, but think about, okay, how do we do something? If we have something, a process, a way of doing things from A to B, for example, just say if we look at simple things like payroll, you know, if that process of payroll, of getting someone paid on time every single month is complicated, then that process is not fit for purpose. So you've got to think about processes as well, but also about how people interact with these processes. Never mind understand them and be familiar with them. And then you think about the systems and technology and the usual stuff, suspects, and then how do we measure our performance? So if you think about from a safety risk perspective, what does that look like? People talk about all sorts, leading and lagging indicators, and when you're looking at your performance measures, your performance measures, again, I would expect in certainly my experiences, they change over time. You may have some steady ones, some consistent ones, but over a period of time, as your organization starts to mature, so those will change as well. And depending on how broad your organization is and how large the organization is and where people are deployed and your businesses are deployed, you may create some kind of hierarchy. So your indicators at this level, at site or project or contract level, start to roll up into top level management, be it your board or otherwise. And then thinking about that, if you're at the current state, which is today, but actually we know in 18 months time, 3 years time, we want to be somewhere X over here, then it's getting from this current state to that future state. And that kind of, do we have to go through any kind of organizational restructures, etc., to get to there? So there may be some interim states as well. And it all comes down to money, to cash, in terms of the investment, and equally how quick do we want a return on that investment. So that kind of pace and change again is crucial, and sometimes we have no control over that. Thank you, Julie. If you could change the slide, please, that'd be appreciated. Now, with this particular organization, there was a kind of 90-day plan whereby certain things started to come together, but the 90 days, pushing to about 100 days, if I recall off the top of my head, there were some key things we had to do and had to go through. But that orientation and planning, that's what it was about. But also, when I think about the planning wasn't all done in the first 90 to 100 days. Some of these becomes part of the room in the organization. So in this particular organization, there were lots of workshops, lots of engagement at board level and across the various boards and the management teams across each of the businesses. But then also there was some individual workshops, and those workshops, for one business, it was kind of like a set up a workshop. In other businesses, it was part of some meetings, but having let a 30-minute session or an hour session as a bolt-on to, because everyone was in a room together. Conducting a SWOT is not unusual, but this particular business introduced me to the strengths, opportunities, and merits, a SOM, and that's really about focusing on what we're good at, what works and what works well. There was no concern about the threats within this particular organization. And actually, thing about football, World Cup's on. If you're going to recruit a new football player or any player to your team, you'd be looking at what they're good at, actually. Yeah, there may be things they have to tweak, etc. There may be some things they want to hone themselves, but if you're thinking actually on what they're good at, that's why we're investing the money. Then we've got PESTEL as well, another type of technique which you may or may not be familiar with. And some of this is kind of standard run-of-the-mill stuff we would do. So if you're going down the line of being aligned with a particular management system standard, be it for risk management, information security, right through to occupational health and safety, and as broad as the management system standards are, then you may be using techniques such as PESTEL. Lots of surveys. I conducted a particular survey with in this particular organisation, the QSE team, to get their input, nothing more than 10 questions, but to get their input anonymously in terms of where they felt the business was doing really well and where they felt we could make changes. Also getting that kind of feel for the culture. You know, with safety and risk, the safety and risk teams or the QSE functions team, or does it sit with the operational people, with the workers at the coalface, right through to the managers of that? Then we also introduced a self-assessment, and a self-assessment, the tool we introduced, high level and then quite a thorough about 18 months in across all 3 businesses, but then separate self-assessments using the same tool. And this came from, if you're familiar with the quality management standards, so 9001, if you look at something like 9004, there are tools in there, and there was also another self-assessment tool we used as well. Climate surveys are great. Again, just getting a feel for how people feel, the good, bad, and the different. But when I talk about climate surveys, this is about, you know, how do people feel? And the state of mind may be different state of mind today as it was yesterday, and it could be tomorrow. But then thinking about, okay, what influencing someone's behaviour within the workplace? So you might be looking at policies and procedures and such like. So get a real feel for that kind of survey. State of the nation is crucial, because it's great to know where you're starting from, because from that point onwards you can measure your improvement. You can look back and say, actually, that's where it was. So if you want to promote it internally and bring people along with you internally, as well as your supply chain partners, it's great. And output of all of this was just starting to develop that whole kind of risk and opportunities. And I think sometimes this is my experience really, whereby I guess from a safety and risk management perspective, sometimes if we think about, we miss or overlook the opportunities. And then we conduct a number of risk management workshops as well. So that's a little bit of a feel for that kind of orientation and planning phase. Like I say, this particular organisation, circa 90 to 100 days, but lots of stuff happening, but then stuff naturally happened as part of the rhythm moving forward as well. Thanks, Julie. This particular organisation, I inherited a team of 31, and getting the team together was crucial. Managing every single individual member of the team's, I guess, expectations, but also fear for a new director coming in was also key as well. So from day one, it's a case of getting to know your team, meeting the team individually, but also collectively. And I think the first time we got together was circa 90 days, whereby everybody came down to London. And for many people, even though they'd worked with each other for so many years, they never really met them face to face, different parts of the business and lots of other reasons to why they could never be in a room together. We went on London Eye. We did one, went around once on the London Eye. I took a step back and just watched the team interact with each other. That was just being together, nothing more than that really, for £500 or whatever it was in investment. I'd already started the conversation, so and the team was starting to talk amongst themselves. And that whole conversation in terms of, okay, well, what are you here for? Some people felt we're here to make sure people do what we've asked them to do. Some people felt, well, all we do is react to something because we're never involved in something. So what we did as a team, we started to create that kind of like, okay, let's break it down. Let's come up with our purpose, our meaning. So this is purely for the function, for the safety and risk team, or the QSE team as it was called. We spent lots of time on this over probably about a 3-month period, I remember rightly thereabouts, up until the first Christmas, and the first key milestone we had. And that kind of, what is the why? So we played around with the words, but one of the words that stuck in there from the original, but also to the final in terms of what the purpose was about being enablers. It was about being part of an organization where we could enable the organization to move forward. We could enable the organization to increase the revenue. We could enable the organization to deliver a service in a way which, as a QSE function, we were, I guess, comfortable with, arguably. You know, we'd asked ourselves, okay, well, what will we do? Well, that's about communications, John. It's about engagement, John. It's about having some kind of brand. John. Everybody needs to understand the brand, what we're about, etc. So you can, all of a sudden, there was kind of like momentum going here and really enthusiasm across the team. Okay, how are we going to deliver it? And this is perhaps breaking it down to granular detail for some people, but this is absolutely crucial to understand exactly what is our direction of travel, where we're trying to get to, but also how we're going to get there. Deadlines was crucial. And part of the organizational culture was whereby actually sometimes the deadline would slip. And that was part of the organizational culture holistically across the businesses. So that kind of by when was quite crucial. And I guess simplistic, you would say, some possibly, but also who's going to do it. So aligning the team was quite key. If we move on to the next slide, please, Julie. So I touched upon it earlier. That aligning the team, you know, it's all well and good saying as a safety and risk management team, as a QSE function, as a CX function, etc. We can be clear in terms of what our vision is. You know, it might be everybody goes home in the same state of mind as they came to work, the same physical state. It may be more than that. It may be we want zero harm, etc. That's great, but it's got to be aligned with the organizational vision. Now, if you can blend the two together and have one rather than have two separate visions, arguably are aligned, then that's fine. So everybody clear where we're trying to get to and make sure it's tangible as well. So you can hang something on it and really measure your progress against it. Even that progress, you're measuring the soft as well as the hard, some would say. So you've got to be able to define what that vision is, that destination, describe it, you know, I get a feel for it, but it's tangible. Within this organization, within any organization, you've got people who want to move up. They may be career driven, they may be quite progressive in terms of where they're trying to get to. And they see you as being as just one part of their journey. We've all got these journeys. Sounds like a cliche, I guess. But it's about creating the opportunities for your team. And I'm thinking about the team now, not necessarily the organization. You know, and the opportunity is, well, actually, if you look at the organizational structure and the family tree, we haven't necessarily got a role that you could step into, but you could create that role, which is what we did in this particular organization. We created a number of different roles to allow people to move further up, certainly stretching them, but equally being comfortable to a degree as well. So opportunities there. You know, that kind of mind the gap, and depending what you follow, who you follow, etc., on LinkedIn or elsewhere, you know, there is always a gap between when you conduct the investigation and how you conduct it. You know, to somebody conducting a risk assessment, etc., that snapshot, that line in the sand, that audit, etc., between perhaps how we imagine it. So it's crucial to actually mind the gap, but also it's crucial to mind the gap in terms of how, as a team, we see things and we think we should be doing things, etc. Because if there is disconnect as a team, then that needs to be brought together. We need to break down those disconnections and create a one team approach. And that is, I guess, is a tough part of any role when you've got line management responsibilities, regardless of your title and where you're at, because you'll find sometimes that people change their position on the bus. We have to let people go sometimes, and sometimes we pick people up. That whole kind of that kind of James Collins approach in terms of the bus. So getting your team in terms of what position is crucial, and that's a tough one. That's a tough one. But you know, I think sometimes maybe as a profession, sometimes you focus on kind of like, you know, what's not working. Well, I think let's focus on the success and let's celebrate those successes. Thanks, Julie. Got a few more slides to take you through. I might go through a little bit quicker because I think I've given you a feel for things. I think we missed a slide out. Have we missed a slide out? Next one.
Don't think so.
No, so I must have changed my slide there when I sent it to you. I do apologise.
Do you want me to go forward one and see what's there?
No, it's okay. Let's stick with that. Let's go back. Yes, let's stick with the circles. So essentially, you know, out of all this, we started to create what we call operating model for a shared support service, bringing the three businesses together and organising my direct reports and the wider team. So everybody had a real involvement in terms of what we call business partners. Yeah, the job title was a head of, etc. But there was one person responsible for each business, and that person's role was to ensure that they was kind of like shoulder to shoulder with their managing director to make sure that their MD got everything that they required, and that included resources, but equally they would be the conscience of the MD as well. In terms of the team who had worked in certain sectors, we gave them this kind of like portfolio manager. So some had worked in crystal engineering, some people had worked in energy, healthcare, etc. You know, they could tell us a little bit about that kind of industry. So they were portfolio managers, and then we had practice leaders. So if you think of any management system, the way you've got it organised, you've got different subject areas. So every single person in the team was a practice leader on 1, 2, 3, I think 5 maximum we had essentially, in terms of being responsible, but also accountable for aspects of the management system. And it was all driven to actually that kind of customer service. Thanks. We'll go to the next slide now, because that, I guess, gives you everyone a real feel for it. Thank you. So that RACI, it's all about the responsible, accountable, consulted and informed, the kind of who. And whilst there was overlap sometimes in somebody having accountabilities and responsibilities, which sometimes is a bit of a nuance, you know, by creating this clarity within the team, everybody, through their objectives, their one-to-ones, their reviews, etc., was held accountable to deliver on what they was asked to deliver. And I guess that's the role of a director and a manager, etc., regardless where you're in an organisation, to make sure people stay true to what you've asked them to do. But equally, you as a leader, you as a manager, have to ensure that you live up to what you've been asked to do as well. So it drives this kind of action-orientated mindset. So we introduced the RACI, which was new for some people, not new for other people. And I think looking back, and Tony may be able to say, because we've got a connection, myself and Tony used to work with each other, you know, I think it went down quite well, arguably. But interesting enough, I think sometimes when you see what the wider business does, that's a real test, because the wider businesses, operational businesses in this case, started to take on board that kind of RACI approach, and all of a sudden everyone was talking about races. Thanks. If you go to the next slide, please, Julie, that'd be great.
Did that not move?
It did, but I thought I put another slide in there. Maybe not, maybe not. Can you just go forward one more slide? Sorry.
Of course.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the perfect. Yeah. So with that kind of structure, if you think about the 3 circles we had with the customer service in the middle of it, you know, that was essentially the RACI through the organisation. We got to break it down. But I think about the management system and these kind of like practice leaders, you know, looking at the management system and the components of a management system, be it from a subject area or otherwise, or discipline area, if you wish to, we just created a structure to it. Now, this is not exhaustive, and that's looking back, it's almost probably outdated as it is now anyway, but that kind of the how we do things, that kind of procedure, the process and the forms that we would use, that practice leader was responsible for that. They was also responsible for any toolbox talks that would hang off that particular subject area. So if we're thinking about Legionella, we're thinking about confined spaces, we're talking about HVLV, I guess typical safety, some people would say. If you're thinking about work at height, if you're thinking about pressure vessels, gas, etc., 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 you know, there's always toolbox talks that hang off that. The practice leader was responsible for that. The practice leader was also responsible for ensuring that we had a robust level of a program for awareness training as well. Now, that wasn't necessarily developing that presentation, but from a very basic awareness, they had a key involvement in that, even if we went outside to an organisation to support us with developing that and rolling it out. We introduced quick reference guides, which they were responsible for and so accountable for as a practice leader. We had very simple 5 and 10 point maximum in terms of checklist implementation. We created this library of example risk assessments. You know, I don't want to call them generic, but it was an example risk assessment on something, delivering a certain, conducting a certain activity, which linked into things like confined spaces, etc. And then we had the whole communication. Now, as a step back, we created a communication strategy, but as a practice leader to ensure that any bulletins, and in some cases the circulars, and less so the alerts, that they was also developing that as well. And I dare say Jason, our coordinator, really kept on the was hot on the heels of everybody. Thank you. So this is just an example in terms of the person who was the practice leader, which essentially was the business improvement manager, in terms of what RACI was associated to Laura in this instance. And you can see there, you may even be able to cherry pick this from a JD, arguably, whereby they had to ensure that we conducted effective performance monitoring, etc. It was about assisting the business as a principal driver, you know, making sure that we had a schedule and implemented that kind of risk-based diagnostics, as we called them, because there's lots of different checking tools. And you can see there, it was about ensuring that everyone was prepared for any first, second, and third party audits, no matter who did those, right through to, you know, to driving excellence, really. And in between there was kind of like seeking out those root causes as well. But I guess if I move on to, I guess the next slide, yeah, it was really about, you know, when you take a step back, about establishing that team. You know, no surprise there. From a leadership perspective, you've got to start to instill and drive empowerment, and people have got to feel empowered. And sometimes it feels like just words, but the more you do, the more you get back in terms of people start to feel empowered. John have got this idea, or they go to CEO and they've got an idea. David have got an idea, etc., etc., etc. There's that there, you know, that whole kind of relationships with them, motivating them, understanding where they were within their career, getting to know them outside of work as well. I'm not saying you've got to go to the pub and have a pint with them and watch the match with them, etc. But certainly get a feel for them. You know, what's their life outside of work? You know, have they got children whereby weekends are just evolve about children taking them to swimming classes, this, that, and the other, right through to, no, I've got no kids, don't want any kids, but this is what we've been doing, myself and my partner, etc. So that whole kind of getting to know them is crucial in terms of, so you can, I think, for how you can motivate them. But I guess whether you're a leader and manager, no matter how you want to describe yourself, it's not about building rapport, it's about trust, it's about earning their respect, you know, showing compassion and being sincere, being humble, making time for them, you know, listening to them, accepting each of them and every one of them for what makes them unique individually, but also collectively. So they all know that they've got a great skill set to offer. And part of delivering that and offering that and making it more effective is actually, if we do it together as a team, we'll be stronger. So really it was about that. And it's all about rewarding them. Sometimes the reward was, you know, accountability to deliver a particular project. Yeah, sometimes reward was financial, it was bonus, it was a new job, it was a new title, lots of little things, but there's lots of ways we can reward people. And just that general kind of like saying, thanks, appreciate your support, etc. So that whole kind of teamwork, motivating the team, individual and collective, was crucial. And it's about fostering the teamwork as well. And I guess it's got behaviours in the bottom there, but you know, we have to define our behaviours where what we expected as from each other as a team. And some of that started to find its way into the job descriptions and role profiles we created for existing roles. We tweaked them slightly, but also for new roles as well. Getting to the back end of this presentation now, I am conscious of time, but if you go to the next slide, please, Julie, that'd be appreciated. And, you know, the kind of third phase, and this is kind of like a virtuous circle, you would say, but, you know, part of the messaging was about this kind of whole drift and helping people visualize. I don't know if you've ever looked into drift into failure at all, but this is, I was exposed to, I used to work with a chap over in Australia many years ago, when I was exposed to a chap called Morris from the university over there, and he introduced me to this kind of concept, this whereby if you get everything right in the middle in terms of your team, your organization, your structure, your systems, your process, your rewards, how you measure performance, your governance, your auditing, your inspections, everything you would, I guess, take for granted, breakdown management system if need be, within the inner circle, you start to find yourself being adaptive and resilient. You're creating this kind of elasticity to take on board reactive stuff that happens. And we talk about reactive stuff being an incident in the workplace sometimes, but you get to react. But if you're looking beyond that and saying, okay, we understand what our indicators are, the good, bad, and the indifferent, we maybe defined them, and you can start to see whether you're starting to drift into that outer circle and through the circles. Now, we can never predict the next incident in the workplace, and we can never predict what incident will be. We can't say how severe it's going to be, or even the potential it's going to be, etc. It might be damage to property. It might be failure to deliver a service. For example, there's no heat and steam in our hospital environment, etc., etc., etc. But when you start to see things happening, it's about how you react to them. And part of this, you think about business continuity. We've gone and your crisis management. You know, it's bringing those aspects there in terms of, in the very simplest form, in terms of emergency preparedness, in terms of, you know, it's about how we anticipate, we respond, we recover, and we learn. And this kind of drifting into failure was part of the messaging we introduced in one of the health and safety weeks. In fact, the very first safety week, I think we introduced it in the business collectively. So that just gives you a feel for some of the things we started to do as a team, but also to communicate to the wider business. And then I guess the next slide, is that slide. So the next slide was some of it was breaking down barriers about, okay, you know, if you think about the bottom right hand corner, I couldn't imagine years ago when someone said to me, John, you can walk into a Tesco and you can check out yourself. And I'm from the north. It's kind of like, can't see that happening. Not up north anyway. But you think about the self-serve checkouts you've got nowadays, and you can walk in a store in certain parts of the world, and all you've got to do is have your phone with you, and you get charged straight away. It's great, it's wonderful. But that's technology. But also the top part of this picture, and the reason what I want to share with you is in terms of technology, whereby, you know, if you've got the right tools to actually monitor whether something is working, be it from a maintenance perspective, etc. We've got these different region devices. You know, all of a sudden, you can start to have a real impact in terms of a business. And the reason why I share this was because of, you know, if you've got anybody who suffers from dementia or Alzheimer's, for example, and my dad died from it, you know, something we was introduced to was the fact that we could actually have these monitors in the family home whereby we could check whether he turned a kettle on or not. No, it didn't mean to say he made himself a cup of tea, but at least we could monitor, and we felt good for it. We felt good for it because we could just check and say, yeah, Dad's put the kettle on, great, he's getting himself a cup of tea. But that was crucial, and bringing those two together for the team and the business was to say there may be something out there already, tried and tested. It may be new technology, we can embrace it, even using our mobile phones, etc., for taking pictures and making notes on it, etc. Right through to, well, what if? Blank piece of paper, come up with that kind of, and just getting people to think about the potential. And then the bottom left hand one was quite cool. I guess Tony might be able to say something here, was whereby always have a plan. If you're clear where you want to get to, you know, have a smart plan so you know what you need to do, who will do what to actually get there. And if you're clear where that destination is, you may be stranded, but having that plan and working through it as a team you can get there. So sometimes once you're clear what the destination is, then having that plan is a great way. And one of the things I did as well, I think it might be the next slide, Julie. One of the things we introduced as a business, or I say across all businesses, was affecting change by what we call communities of practice. Now, you might think about things like centres of excellence, and yes, it's a centre of excellence. But if you've ever worked or do work in the design industry, and I think of like architects and design, etc., you know, you have lots of communities, you know, lots all about practice, isn't it? And this is where the idea came from, whereby, you know, again, going back to those kind of practice leaders earlier, those people who'd worked in the healthcare environment, worked in energy, etc., bringing those people together, along with those people responsible for certain aspects of the management system, we could start to drive the cultural change of the organisation, whereby everything we was doing as a function start to become part of what the organisation was doing, you know, living and breathing it across the 3 different operational businesses across the UK and Ireland. Now, we was all about just an interdependent as a culture. That was kind of like our strap line in terms of what we wanted to fill, but we didn't just get there overnight. So this kind of like virtuous circle, and ideally not a vicious circle, is the fact that if you start to create that energy and enthusiasm with your practice leaders within that whole kind of community of practice, sharing good ideas, sharing the good news stories, you know, those case studies, as well as communicating them internally, you know, they go a long way. But equally, they become part of your case studies to support your bids and your presentations to your current customers for a new contract, a new project, and right through. So it's really getting to that, and you start to see the energy going through the organisation. Thanks, Julie. I think I might have, this might be the last one. I'm not so sure. Yes, maybe. So I've kind of rushed through this apart. I don't think I've done it justice at all by just giving you an hour, because I could talk all day on this. But you know, I use the reference point of the term point of reference. It doesn't matter how you come in at this. It doesn't matter where you are and what you're doing. Be clear in terms of what your point of reference is. You know, we've got the legal requirements. You may be subscribing to a management system standard, be it 9,000, 14,000, 15, 50,000, 33,000, whatever. You may not be going for certification, so accreditation to that particular management system standard, but you may align yourself with it, etc. Then there are accreditations that we've got across the UK and further afield as well. Don't forget, you've got your own company standards. If you have any, maybe not. You've got your client, you've got your contractual requirements, but also you've got that kind of like expectations as well. Yeah, we've got the moral aspect and the ethical aspect as well. And sometimes you may not have had a conversation about these, but you need to. It's a tough conversation sometimes, depending where your organisation is. But all of the above, however you define all of the above and about how you present all of the above, you know, this is your ticket to the game. You need all of that nowadays just to get on someone's tender list, regardless of whether you win the work or not. Unfortunately, that's what clients or customers are asking for. So a lot of this is taken for granted, and by having any of this, it doesn't necessarily you're good, better, and different compared to your competitor, but at least as you are consistent with what your competitor's doing, and that's something else to bear in mind as well. Don't do what your competitor's doing because they're doing it, but just be mindful in terms of what your competitors are doing, so you can actually compete with them, and maybe look at differentiate. So the point of reference is absolutely crucial, and I guess it's my way of saying, legally, what do we need to do? Because that's our measure. And that's a challenge, especially when you start to work in other countries where the standards may be, the legal standards may be higher or lower than what you may expect. Or you may work in somewhere like Australia, where they've got 6 territories. I'm working in Belgium at the moment, and there are different regions in Belgium, so there's a subtle difference in the legislative requirements too. So you've got all this to consider as well as a point of reference. And I think that might be it. I think that might be it. Yes. Thank you.
Great, thank you for an excellent presentation there, John. We don't have any questions at the moment, so if anybody's got any questions, now's the time to pop them into the questions area. Tony, do you have any questions for John? I'll just unmute you.
Yes, I do. You spoke at the outset, John, about the strategic realisation plan, and you identified sort of 5 key areas within that.
Yeah.
From your experience, is there any one of those areas that are standout or that are more important, say, in terms of rating it?
I
mean, because obviously 5 clear principles, excellent, but
yeah.
would there be one that's a standout in your experience?
I think if he was asking me to prioritise any of those, I would think I would prioritise certainly what are we about? What is that raison d'etre? What is that? Because that is key.
Yeah.
You know, and you think about, you know, just one example that comes to mind is Toyota against Honda many years ago. One of those organisations said, we want to be better than the other people. That was it. That's what we're about. That's what the mission. That's what the mission was. If you think about someone like Zara, they're as an organisation, they are set up to react to the market. That's not necessarily the mission, but they're operating. The way they conduct their businesses, they react to the market rather than bet on it. Because they've got this great organisation set up in terms of logistics, their supply chain, etc. So I think that's key, because that is our why, isn't it? Essentially, that's our why. And then I think for me, it's understanding, and this may be just where I sit separately, is understanding commercially where the business is and where it wants to get to. Because if you've got that context in terms of where the organisation sees himself in a couple of years' time, it doesn't matter what size or scale the organisation is today and what it will be. It could be a £10 million business to a £1 billion business. For me, to have that kind of understanding in terms of that, then, you know, ultimately that drives people's behaviour, that commercial. So that really. So I would say prioritise those two. But I've used this model for so many years, thanks to the guys at Bringer from 2009, 2008. I've always used that model. I've got another similar model as well, but I've never used the model broke it down, I guess. I've got a question for you, Tony. Is that what you wanted from the presentation?
I mean, it's an excellent presentation, John. You know, it goes without saying to relaunch our branch. You know, it was always going to take some work. So I do indeed thank you on behalf of the East Anglian Branch Committee for your time and effort in delivering this webinar. And likewise, I would also like to say to anyone listening that if they're interested in getting in touch and joining the East Anglian Branch Committee, then of course people are very welcome to contact me directly, because we're always looking for volunteers, and indeed the ideas from our members about the events they would like to see run in the future.
Great, thank you, Tony, and thank you, John, for an excellent presentation. I just wanted to remind everyone that the recording will be on the IIRSM YouTube channel in the next couple of days. And for those of you who would like your attendance certificates, they'll come out this time tomorrow. If anyone does want to get in touch with John or Tony and you don't have the contact details, just contact me at branches@IIRSM.org and I'd be happy to pass on your details and your queries to John and or Tony. So I'd like to thank John, great presentation. Thank you, Tony, for taking up the chair of the East Anglia branch, and the rest of the committee, or hopefully you'll meet in upcoming webinars. I'd like to wish everyone a good evening or a good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. Good evening, everyone.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.